the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, talking about issues with affordable housing. Today's HUD topic takes us to St. Louis, Missouri, where they had the Pruitt Igoe project, and I'm sure I said that wrong. This is going to be a very overly simplified breakdown of an interesting topic that deserves way more attention, so remember, I'm just a llama doing my best. Built in the early 1950s, it was a federally funded housing project and comprised of about 33 buildings, and it was supposed to be integrated housing. There are some documentaries and different articles about the different factors as to why this ended up being kind of a failure, so we're just going to discuss a couple. Keep in mind, in the background, there was also stuff going on in the economy and culture in the 1950s and 60s that would have also affected this project. The main architect on the project was Minoru Yamasaki. I'm sure I said that wrong too. He wanted to make it to where it was actually less land, encouraged community, and the feds at the end of the day basically said no to all of that, which is why it ended up looking the way it did. The secretary at the time was Robert C. Weaver, who said that the housing subsidy at the time was not sufficient for many marginalized families. I might do more on him later, it just depends. And as many of you might have guessed, within about 4 to 5 years, it was already showing signs of falling apart and where they cut corners because of poor materials and not great design. Part of this is because there wasn't really much money to fix stuff. Why wasn't there a lot of money for maintenance costs? Well, part of this is the Housing Act of 1949. This required that any expenses that needed to be paid needed to come from the rental income, and when your expenses exceed your rental income, kind of obvious to see what happens. With less money for daily operations and maintenance fees, how do they offset it? They raised the rent and added fees. After a while, things just kind of stayed in disrepair, and then crime started to go up, and by 1970, only about 10 of the 33 buildings were still occupied. What did the apartments feature, you ask? Well, the apartments were smaller, they had smaller kitchens and appliances, they had skip elevators, assuming they even worked, there was poor ventilation, no balconies, no public mailboxes, and there weren't very many stores and amenities nearby. What are skip elevators, I hear you ask? Well, they stop on designated floors, and in this case about every third, like the 1st, 4th, and 7th. Let's say you're on the 5th floor. You either go down 2 flights of stairs or you go up 1 flight of stairs, which means accessibility is also an issue here. Well, by 1973, barely 20 years after these were built, HUD decided that they were going to demolish this project, and by 1976, the whole thing went down. Last time I looked, this land is still vacant, and there's some suggestions out there as to how to use this, but as of right now, it seems to still be empty. The reason I bring up the Pruitt Igoe project, however the heck you say it, is because this is often used as a scapegoat to try to convince people that there should be less money for public housing. But in reality, this is what happens when there's poor design, poor materials used, and not necessarily a lot of thought put into what will happen in the future. Llama out.